suggest how you can be self-critical, what would it be that you would look to see, when that needs to change, or when what you're doing is no longer working as well as it should be?
I can give examples. Darfur, walking around in Janina, in the market, seeing the guy with a belt that had a huge thick wad of cash strapped to his belt. And I had meanwhile been talking to people struggling to get logistics contracts arranged to move food from Port Sudan west out to Darfur. Saying, why? All we need to do is put cash in that guy's hands. If you know that there's cash there, the market is going to bring the stuff that you need. Why do we have to be worrying about the logistics? Bit of a caricature, but it wasn't about failure. And this is the whole point. It was about opportunity. And it was about possibility. And let's take advantage of the possibility. Because the world around us is changing. It wasn't that we're doing anything poorly. And to be honest, if you run the numbers, there are times when we can deliver food more efficiently than markets can because of our economies of scale and excellence and so on. There's times when we can't, so that's why it's knowledge driven. But the point is, the world around us is changing. We're not failing. We just have to respond to the opportunity which the world enables us to take advantage of. Darfur, if that's too small of an example, we can jump to Lebanon, we can jump to Syria, we can jump to Jordan. Again, cash makes a ton of sense there, and we go, oh, yeah, but those aren't normal kinds of examples of humanitarian emergencies. So let's go back to some place like Darfur and say, yeah, that is a normal example. And even there, the cash could have made a sense if we balanced it appropriately. So it was sort of that moment of recognizing opportunity in a changing world around us and how we can keep up with that. That very quickly gets to the example of personality. It's no longer personality to persuade my donor to give me food when that's not what I need. It's the personality, which is the profile, the capability of my organization institutionally to say, how do I think through this problem set in a different way than I have been traditionally? Traditionally, the problem set was, how do I move 700,000 metric tons of food a year to place X? Now it's a question of, how do I negotiate good terms, with a financial service provider and a technology money provider? It's a totally different skill set that's required than the traditional skill set that we used to have. So it's a different spin on your personality question. And that's what I say when the role is changing of the UN agency. I love the helicopters, I love the trucks, that's why I got into WFP, it was so much more fun. But that might not be the right thing to continue being 5, 10, 15, and 20 years from now. So how are we going to reprofile ourselves in order to serve the role that the world needs? Because it's changing around us faster than we are changing internally. So quick answer to your question.
Maybe to build on that from a different angle, we're going through a strategy process at the moment, trying to define our long-term strategy. And I suppose a lot of organizations did this work, as I said, fairly new, we're only in existence for 8 years. And as part of the process, we went back and evaluated our last 5-year strategy and sat down and said, right, how are we going to, what has changed and what hasn't changed in 5 years? And if you, in our space, the health sector, there is so much change. And the situation is so dynamic, be it disease patterns, be it government structures, be it technology, pharmaceuticals, it's constant change. And you see a lot of this coming in also from in the business world, that it is a state of constant change at the moment. So what does a long-term strategy look like these days? Can you actually start to do anything other than plan to keep innovating the whole time? Innovating in the sense of reacting to the world around you and trying to stay out in front of certain things and not constantly on the back foot. So a lot of different skill sets in the organization, I would agree. A lot of listening, a lot of reacting, and not being afraid to go into a situation saying, I maybe don't know what this is going to look like 2 years from now. And that is causing us to have to fundamentally rethink how you sit down. So as a management team, how do you plot the course for your organization? How do I explain to the supervisory board how they should be evaluating our progress along those lines? So from a different angle, it's the same situation, dealing with constant flux the whole time.
Thank you for those examples. Let's turn it over if anybody has any questions, follow-up that you'd like to ask. We have a mic in the back.
Hi, my name is Sarah Risky. I'm a cash transfer specialist who works with a consulting firm called Avenir Analytics. And Ken, my question is for you. You talked about big data and the importance of this, and that we need to be looking around this and doing things with this. I'd like you to just unpack that just a little bit and really talk about it very much in terms of how agencies can start using this a lot better, because I think there is a lot of data that we're gathering, and cash transfer programs are perhaps bringing this to the forefront, but it is not just related to cash. All our monitoring, the registration, the way that we look at needs, there's so much happening with big data, so I would love to hear a little bit more about that. Thanks.
Okay. For those of you wondering, by the way, I'm not emailing during this panel, I'm taking notes. For those of you wondering, by the way, I'm not emailing during this panel, I'm taking notes, and this is one of the points that I noted on my little iPad to talk about if it came up. I wasn't the one that mentioned big data. I mentioned knowledge and data and information. I don't care if it's big or little, we need to use it. So that's why I avoided the word. But the question is a good one, and let me try and unpack it for you.
I've taken notes. You mentioned data. Don't get out of it.
At the end of the day, what we're interested in is we're interested in outcomes which transform the situations of the client that we're trying to serve. Whether it's a household, whether it's the government, whether it's the community, we're trying to transform the outcomes. And as mentioned, outcomes are interrelated. So I can achieve a nutrition outcome, for example, by pumping a certain amount of micronutrients into the mouths of the beneficiaries I'm trying to serve. I can achieve a livelihood outcome by giving them a certain amount of purchasing power. They might use that purchasing power to buy nutrients. They might use that purchasing power to pay rent. They might use that purchasing power for something else. We're not sure. And if I'm sitting on nutrient data, and another colleague in another agency is sitting on nutrient data, and another colleague in another agency is sitting on rent data, and another colleague is sitting on livelihoods data, and we're not interacting and figuring that out, none of us are knowing whether we're cost effectively achieving the outcomes that need to be achieved. So the ability to analyze big sets of data, to look for correlations that none of us individually might be looking for as sector-specific agencies, is an enormous new opportunity for us to get it more right than we're already getting it. I don't want to say we're getting it wrong, but we're going to get it more right, the more refined analysis we can do on whether or not the interventions we're doing are having the outcomes that we're intending to have. So that's one area of data analytics where I feel like there's an enormous opportunity. Previously, like I said, there was just a simple technical interoperability problem. We couldn't mine each other's data. There's also political problems with mining data. But presumably, once the pressure is there to solve the political problem, can we solve the technical problem? Now we can. So again, interoperability of services and systems enables us to mine each other's data and achieve analyses about whether we are or not achieving outcomes. And if not, we can change the program on the fly in order to achieve those outcomes. Whether that means saying, oh, we've gone overboard on the cash, let's pump in a little bit of actual nutrients through food. Or whether we got that entirely wrong and it didn't matter, all we really needed to do is get purchasing power to be able to achieve a humanitarian outcome. Those are the sorts of measurements which I'm particularly interested in and which we have an opportunity to do. The other interesting factor of this, and why I said there was a unique role, I think, for UN and humanitarian agencies in this space, is that cell phone companies are sitting on their call records. Twitter presumably is sitting on its things, and Google is sitting on its things. There's big chunks of data that they're never going to share with each other because there's commercial advantage to them to owning their data and not letting it go out. Theoretically, this is an innovation session. A common data, a data commons with a trusted broker could solve that commercial advantage problem, and enabling an enormous amount of analysis to happen to achieve a social good, a humanitarian good, so long as you respect the conditions on the privacy of that data. So there's another whole opportunity which I think might be emerging, which is an interesting area. So cash and voucher transfer, again, to me it's a ripe opportunity now, but at the end of the day, the real prize is on data, which allows us to measure outcomes.
Sorry, I just wanted to come in on this with big data and what's being done about it. I actually was lucky enough to be in London at the ODI on Tuesday, where they launched the report A World That Counts, which is being published by the UN, I think it's Global Pulse. They had a report all about this particular issue, which is the big data issue, the fact that we're moving, information is coming in, and how do we make sure that we've got it all right. And I recommend that you all download it and read it, it's really interesting. And then the other thing is that there is an initiative through the UN called HDX, which you can join them on Google, and there's a whole lot of updates coming in, which is all about these common data sets. Agencies are giving up 15, 20 years worth of data that's being created, and anybody who's a real geek in the room can actually volunteer to analyze some of that data and put it online as part of a crowdsourcing initiative. So I think what's really exciting is it is happening, and we just need to know about it and engage. So you can look it up, HDX.
Could I just add on that partly a plug, because part of the HDX is the Humanitarian Exchange Language, which is something that's supported by the HIP. I should get that in. And we also, I think, funded other projects like the Speed Evidence Platform, which is directly trying to find better ways of breaking down data so it's of use in the hands of operational practitioners, which I think is going to be one of the key things to make it useful. Although I would, maybe to sound a note of caution, if I think about the UK, one of the sort of real big investors and pioneers of big data analytics was a big supermarket firm called Tesco, which knows everything about what you eat and what you do with it. But it hasn't, they're a huge player and still one of the largest supermarkets in the UK, but it hasn't allowed them to stay ahead of the game and fend off competition from rivals with different business models, selling cheaper things like Aldi and Lidl, you may be familiar with. So I think it's going to allow big organisations to do new things, and it's going to be particularly important they're able to share, but I don't think it's going to solve some of the more systemic issues that some of those agencies face.
Luke, sorry, you also mentioned big data. I just want to give you the opportunity. I think it's a conversation that everybody's quite interested in. So if you want to put in your 2 cents, because you mentioned it, otherwise, I'll bring it back. No pressure. Next question.
Morning, Jose Maynez. I'm a consultant. I like innovating innovation because it looks like we already innovate. I would like to know how your organizations stimulate your own partners, colleagues to innovate. How do you drive that process?
Just to repeat the question, how we encourage our own partners and colleagues? Stimulate. Exactly. Okay.
That innovation arises and happens. Something else that daily life, and if we go to the camp, surviving it is innovating every day. Within the organization, probably people need that kind of stimulus.
I start on that. And again, I hear all these amazing examples from the field, and obviously I can provide a very different and limited perspective, which is working in headquarters with colleagues who, while they're all exposed to innovation everywhere, maybe they don't know exactly how to tackle it. Like you're saying, how do you actually engage colleagues and partners? So I think that it's really important for leaders in any organization, for managers, to encourage people and staff members to experiment and to be creative, and this has to, I really think, be reflected even in performance documents and all that actually there is a room for exploring something that is not very doesn't come very natural in big bureaucracies or big organizations. And I think from my own experience, I can just give you a quick anecdote. One of the work plan goals of my big director was also, be innovative, and come up with innovative ideas to increase outreach to the word, etc. And then you wonder what exactly does that mean. So I launched a partnership with Parsons School of Design with a master's program, and they do a lot of design-led innovation. And we had a workshop with staff members from DPI and Parsons students on generating creative ideas to increase outreach to New York City in that case. And what really happened, nobody knew what was going or what was expected from them when they started the workshop. But after the 3 hours, people were just led through different exercises. People were just led through different exercises. Getting up, talking, and coming up with ideas without being afraid of the idea not being good enough, or no budget to be there for the idea, or any of these restrictions that we face working in these environments. Also, I think that innovation or innovative ideas cannot come from you sitting in front of your computer and then that light bulb going off and you have something great and then you run with it. It really doesn't happen like that. So the whole workshop idea was really thought of as an experience and an incentive for people to explore how it feels to actually be creative and come up with ideas that are meaningful. And now obviously the challenge is how do you scale that, right? Because you had a great workshop and a pilot, we did a prototype afterwards. We actually came up with a mobile coffee shop that was supposed to cruise around in New York City and engage people in dialogue about the UN. So something really creative, and then you wonder, well, where do we go from there? How do we scale it? How does it become part of the business planning of a bigger unit? And I mean, these are all questions. I'm still looking for the answers for those questions, but it was just a small example of how important it is to give people room to explore, to allow failure, to allow experimentation, to seek partnerships with people that have experience, thinking outside the box and delivering on needs of clients. And so I think that's a direction that we should go more often. And obviously, this is a headquarters perspective, but I think in the field of the partnerships and the exploring is at least as important.
Just to add to that last point, I think innovation happens all the time. It's just part of who we are as people a lot of the time. And I think from our experience, two things to keep in mind. One is to be able to identify when it's happening. And a lot of mistakes are made from top-down innovation. We've got a great example in our own company where we, what I call our Microsoft Vista moment, where we changed our patient registration system based on the needs of the head office, and Arl had fantastic ideas about how we could be innovative, and it was a disaster. The people on the ground had much better perspective on what was actually needed to adjust, and so that's a real learning point. And the second point, I think, is, which Nina already said, is collaboration, and I think that's probably for a lot of our organizations one of the biggest challenges of this new age of interlinkages, is that you have to get away from an ossified structure of this is our job, this is how we work, and let's keep it all in-house. Collaboration is the future, I think, really, in our sector. And it really, people have to get used to a new zone of comfort of working together. And so if you can change your structure to be able to identify what's happening on the point of delivery, where it really matters in your organization, and give the freedom to be able to work together, I think we've already done something that many, many organizations are still struggling with.
The Post-Migration Review had a recent publication which is all about innovation, one of the sub-magazines that came with it, and a lot of agencies have written about their innovation practices so that you can hear firsthand if you read that what different agencies are doing. But I think rather interestingly, it's a bit like innovation benefit shopping. Which agencies have got the coolest program? They've got labs, they've got workshops, massive funds, like the little ones, the big ones. Give us your ideas, platform, your blogs, everything's happening out there. It's almost like there's too much, almost. But people are engaging with the different agencies that have been trying to innovate ideas to innovate. So that's really interesting. But my favorite actually is UNICEF. They have Fail Friday, and everybody gets to come week, and I just love it because I want to go there and I've got lots to say.
Very quickly, that was yesterday's session, but the point is exactly this. Innovation for its own sake isn't the goal. The goal is the result. The goal is the outcome that you're trying to be able to achieve. And that getting a lot of ideas, getting processes, getting systems behind it, it takes work to get the processes and systems behind it. But getting people to think and stimulate innovation, that's not the problem. The problem is saying, what is the outcome we're trying to achieve? And anybody who's going to got a good idea to achieve that outcome, we're willing to listen to it. And then we're measuring the ones that maybe are promising, and we'll try and set outcome. We're willing to listen to it. And then we're measuring the ones that maybe are promising, and we'll try and systematize those ones that seem to have some really good success.
In the RAF, they beg the pilots to tell them their failures, because when they do that, they collate the failures and then they can train everybody not to fail. So the pilots that fail are deemed as hugely successful. So I think that almost this idea of learning from failure is in itself and of itself a success, sort of modality. I run an NGO, and our goal is to innovate, and through capturing knowledge and making that knowledge really easy to understand. And I have had a lot of trouble trying to explain this. I think it's to large donors and to try and get the message across to them. And I think it's because of the fear of investing time and energy and effort in something that might fail. And I've been through every single step very carefully and closely. And the outcomes that I'm proposing are solid. I'd love to talk with one or all of you at the end of this about my ideas. Thank you.
Of course, because I always like to talk, so apologies. I want to challenge your comment that donors are averse to risk. I don't think that's the case. Our experience is that if you have an idea and you have a plausible theory of change, and you have sort of a set of metrics by which you measure whether you're making progress towards it, there's a lot of openness to give it a try. And that's in a field which is, frankly, has been driven by a fairly restricted set of donor engagement for many, many years. So I actually don't buy it that donors are risk averse. I think agencies are risk averse because agencies don't want to disrupt their own core business model and what's been working for generations.
But I do think that there are big barriers to entry for new entrants into the market, and that is a problem. The old guard are very keen to keep the barriers up quite high as well, and that is a challenge. You mentioned the RAF, and you made me think of another aviation analogy, which was something called CHIRP, which I've just been learning about, which is a mechanism that they have in aviation in the maritime industry, which is a confidential reporting mechanism for incidents. So if there's a safety incident in the aviation sector, professionals can go online and confidentially report this in a way that doesn't mean they have to put their own neck on the line, but there can be learning and improvement. And I think that in terms of risk, too often in the humanitarian sector, the risks are placed on individuals. And so it takes an individual who's willing to risk their personal and professional progression to push an innovation forward. If it works, the agency will be quite happy to claim the credit, and if it doesn't, they'll be quite happy to blame the individual. And I think that's a cultural change that we need to make to empower people to innovate more. Someone earlier was using the term institutionalised in the future. I get that in terms of building systems and processes, but I also think there's a risk that for operational people who are essentially people who need to be innovative, there's a risk that they'll see innovation as being something that literally innovation uses, and I think that's quite dangerous.
Unfortunately, we've hit our time limit. I'm looking at my notes. I could spend another 45 minutes just kind of trying to restate everything that you just said. But there's maybe two key things I think were mentioned a few times. That reason or the cause or the catalyst for innovation isn't failure, as I kind of proposed but it's recognizing opportunities and just being aware and keeping your eyes open for how the world has changed around what you were doing and being able to kind of capture that. And what was also mentioned a few times, being empowered to say, look, it's not going perfectly. Failure Friday sounds like a great idea. So whether or not you call it failure is maybe a definitional thing, but being able to say there's an opportunity to improve. We've looked around and here's how we're going to adapt. I really appreciate your suggestions and your summaries. Thank you very much. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the day.
About the same subject this afternoon, à propos de la même chose.
Ouais, même
la suite.
Oui, ça.
Tu as déjà fait ça? Ah, mais ça c'est bien. Photo? Photo?
Gana